Welcome everybody again to this event. For right now, I just wanted to introduce, without further ado, our speaker for today, Bindiya Murgai, and just give you a little bit of the qualifications. So a little bit of a background is that I was forwarded a entire email with the PDF of almost 3 pages of her accomplishments and everything. So she's uh, done a lot in her life, and she's also have has received many awards. So this is going to be a quick minute introduction into her many qualifications. But Bindia is a mental and fitness digital detox coach who has conducted over 100 workshops on a range of mental fitness and digital wellness. Her writings has been published across numerous leading platforms and newspapers, and she also works closely with the tribal communities in the Himalayas, where she conducts interactive youth meetups to address issues like depression, addiction, preserving cultural identity, and career-related issues. She's helped set up the high-altitude toilets in the Kunsal Primary School in Spiti Valley and is part of the Arise Prison Products project that helps inmates generate an income by creating products from recycled materials. She's also been awarded, like I said earlier, the Karmavir Chakra and the Karmavir Puraskar Jyoti Award by iCongo in association with the United Nations. India has made many key talks. This is not her first rodeo, and her talks have been greatly applauded at various large summits, formats, and educational institutions. And her interactive student sessions with students, teachers, and corporate executives and other professionals, including homemakers, are crafted to help cultivate mental fitness, create balance, and lead a productive and enriching professional and personal life. So, without further ado, I'd just like to give over the floor and welcome Bindiya Murgai.
Thanks so much, Rohan, and thank you for that lovely introduction. And I also want to say thank you for everyone for making the time to actually join, because I understand that these days time is a really valuable commodity for all of us, especially in the days of working from home. But hopefully by the end of this session, by the end of this hour, you'll go back with some simple strategies that are going to help you create more balance in your life. I know you may be thinking that is work-life balance really possible, especially when you're working from home? And the simple answer is yes, it absolutely is. But we need to take a step back. We need to recalibrate our lives and we have to create this balance. It doesn't happen on its own. So we don't have to move in from being trapped in our offices to suddenly feeling like we've been trapped in our very homes. Now, for the past few years, there's been a lot of chat about virtual offices, people working from home, and so on. But the thing is, most of us, I think for most of us, it's remained a motivational tool rather than something which has been a reality on an ongoing basis. And it was an option we could, occasionally exercise, because companies by and large considered physical offices more productive, more effective, more collaborative. But suddenly, thanks to COVID-19, nobody had a choice. We were just abruptly sort of thrown into the deep end, into this alternate world of work from home, which erupted on us. So if you go back even as close to where we are as January this year, you could probably recall that your weekday mornings were a blur of activities. You would have the alarm, you'd hit snooze, you'd wake up, jump, shower, have a quick breakfast, wade through sort of peak hour traffic, go through a parking lot which was very crowded, hoping to find parking, not waste too much time, and just about make it to the finish line, which was your office door. Now, after months of being locked in, most people seem to be missing that very hecticness and the rush that they dreaded before. And naturally, because post lockdown, we're not only missing our offices, the casual banter, the strolling around to the conference room, hearing a little bit of gossip here and there, a little tea break, little catch ups, bad jokes, even the boring birthday parties. I've heard people, they're even missing those. They never wanted to attend them before. And the grumpy co-worker, we even seem to be missing them. But up until March, the interesting thing is that if you Googled images of work from home, the search threw up images of people drinking champagne with a laptop, probably sitting in a tub with a bubble bath, and some really fancy images like that would come for that search. But now, if you go today and search, the search has changed. Now the images are more of like serious looking professionals sitting at a desk, and every now and then you'll find an image of also some kids wandering around in the background. because Google is keeping up with the times and is getting us closer to what the reality of working from home really looks like. And it's not a cakewalk. It's been a very steep learning curve, I think, for most of us. And it's putting our ability really through the acid test. We're having to be adaptable, resilient. There's a lot of things we're doing, and in a very short time. So, this perpetual ticking of the clock, us being edgy, on our toes, often working longer hours than before, surprisingly, jumping between screens, video meetings, cooking, cleaning, running errands, washing, shopping, managing kids or elders in the house. And then, of course, coming back to emails and deadlines and bosses and more video calls, it's a lot to take in. And it can actually be very, very exhausting. But the good news is that it's doable without actually burning ourselves out. But we need to stay calm, we need to stay disciplined, and we have to cultivate resilience. All we need to start from is by redefining some boundaries for ourselves and to readjust some of our sails. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So, Rohan, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Bindiya. And now we're gonna go on to a more conversational part of the program. So, like you guys know, we've done this before. A lot of what we do is conversational. We want to engage in a conversation with everybody on the call. So, I have a certain questions that I've typed up and put on a PowerPoint, and me and Bindiya are gonna go through it. If anybody has anything, any comments, any questions or anything, please feel free to unmute yourself and put yourself on camera and join the conversation. There's really no limit to what we can discuss today. So yeah, so the first question that I wanted to kind of ask to Bindiya and to start off this conversation is I think Bindiya has been working from home for quite a bit now. And I wanted you, Bindiya, to just tell us a little bit about your experience, how you started working from home, and how it also has changed during this pandemic when suddenly everybody is working from home as well.
Yeah. So I started actually working from home at a time when it wasn't a fashionable thing to do. It wasn't a common thing to do. And this was almost about 13 to 14 years ago. But it was very interesting because I ran a production company, a film production company, where we had this nice big office. I had lots of people reporting to me. There was someone to carry the bag and bring the coffee and all of that. And side by side, I actually fragmented also to start my therapy practice. And that was happening out of my home. So the moment I would transition from that office environment of the production company and get into the home environment to do, appointments with my clients, it was a very, very different world. Suddenly I was the peon, the receptionist, the tea maker, and the therapist and everything else. And I started noticing such a huge shift in people's perception towards my work. When they come to office to meet me, they'd all be so respectful of my time, respectful of, even me, what I was doing. But the moment they'd see me doing work from home, they would just be sort of not respectful and mindful of the fact that I was still working, even though I was physically working out of my home space. So I struggled a lot in the initial few years trying to define those boundaries and making people understand that just because I'm working from home doesn't mean that my work is any less serious. It doesn't mean that it's any less important. And it doesn't mean that people could just barge in and intrude on my time at their own wish at any point that they wanted. So that was a huge shift. And it took a while to get that balance right, because even though I tell people, please don't come between this time and this time, a lot of times they would be disrespectful and they'd be like, ringing the bell, it's your home, we can come anytime we want and bring us some coffee, we just came to say hi. So that took a while to kind of drill that into everyone's system, that this was serious, it was work, and I was not available even if they were to show up and ring a bell. But what I find over a period of time, and even more so now post pandemic, is that because almost everybody is working from home, at least a huge chunk of the population is, so I find suddenly everyone gets it. People are like, they'll call and they'll say, oh, yeah, you're busy. So we'll call you after so and so time because we know that you're busy with work. Now, the very same people who were not mindful of it, not respectful of it, or won't take it with the same amount of gravitas, I find have changed their attitudes as they've seen a lot more people around them working from home and taking it very seriously.
Cool. And yeah, I mean, it only took a pandemic, I think, for that to happen, for that mindset switch to happen. No, okay. So I kind of want to dig in a little bit on what you said originally during that, during what you just said. You said that you kind of had set hours or something that you had that nobody can disturb you. So can you go a little bit more into that and how we can kind of try and apply that to our work from home?
Yeah, sure. I think, the key to working successfully from home is really creating boundaries of several kinds. So, to begin with, if we were to talk about the most basic boundary that we should all create, it's about having a schedule and having a routine and announcing it to people you share your home with, as well as people outside in your personal life, because that then creates the first layer by making them know that, okay, from 9 to 6 or 7 or whatever it is, it's not time for personal calls, it's not time for personal stuff. And even for people at home, once you define a schedule and tell them, okay, these many hours I'm not available, but I take a break, I come out at such and such time, so whatever's needed, hold on till then unless it's an emergency. Once you start defining that, people start taking it more seriously, and they start understanding that just because you're working from home doesn't mean that they can just come in and out, pull you out for anything at their own whim, at their own timing. So, the very first thing, like I said, is a schedule. The second and very, very important thing, which I think a lot of people are probably not yet accustomed to, is defining a very clear workspace. Now, you may or may not have the luxury of extra space in terms of having a room which is your room, but surely you can have one corner in a room where you can even put something simple like a rod and a curtain, and that is your corner, that is your office. You know that when you go in there, and your family or people you're sharing the house with know that when you're in there, it's work time. And psychologically also, it helps you create a distance between work and your personal space, because if you're going to keep sitting on your bed, your couch, keep moving from here to there, there is no space left which is personal. There is no space left where you can actually unwind. So I think that is another very important boundary to create. And when you do scheduling, I think it's important to also schedule the needs of other people who might be around at home and who might be needing you, like in the truest sense. For example, you may have young kids who you do need to go and pay some attention to and monitor and see what they're up to. Or you may have elderly parents who may be living with you, or you may have a dog who needs to be taken for a walk. So, any dependents who are there, when you define to them that there are time slots which are available for them, it's also clearer for them that they can step back and wait for you at that time to get whatever is required done at that time. So that's the other boundary. And then there are a couple of other things which I think are important, such as boundaries that we create between distractions, the so called siren songs. So sometimes when we're working from home, we feel like we're watching a nice, interesting series. So why don't I just continue watching it for a little longer, one more episode or one more episode? So that lure, that temptation to give in to that first also exists. So with boundaries, we also have to create boundaries which tell us that this is work time. So just like we don't sit at office and watch series or read books or do something else, we should also not have those leisure or entertainment activities built into the regular routine of our workday. Now, it's not so much about boundaries, what I'm going to say, but it's more about, I would say, sort of a habit which is good to cultivate when you're working from home. And that is the habit of changing your clothes. So you don't have to get into a suit, you don't have to put on a sari, you don't have to do that. But don't just wake up, be in your jammies, and spend the rest of the day sitting there in the jammies. Because what that does is psychologically, it's not creating a break, it's not defining a space between work and your personal life. And you need that. And you need to get ready for the day, not because people are going to see you or not see you. Maybe your videos are always turned off, as it is for many people right now. But it's not about the other person. It's about doing it for yourself as a matter of discipline, as a matter of hygiene, not just physical hygiene, but work hygiene. So that again, I find is something which is extremely, extremely important and really does help a lot. It also helps for you to define your day into little blocks. So create little blocks for your day where you can have little intermittent breaks so that you don't feel the fatigue of being bogged down, and you also can go from time to time to attend to other stuff that you need to attend to. But at the same time, when you're defining a framework to your day and you're defining the number of hours you want to work, then you shouldn't include commute time in those hours. You should keep that separate, because let's say you spend 2 or 3 hours commuting from home to work. Don't bunk those into your work hours, because what that tends to do is it creates exhaustion. Then you're sitting, you're working, you're putting in that extra time, but you're not working optimally because you don't have that much time left by the end of the day to attend to other things, including your own entertainment and relaxation, and of course, people around. So I think these are few things which are important to keep in mind, Rohan.
Yeah, and I think, going on to the second slide also, I think we covered a lot of those topics in terms of something that really resonated with me. I know that you went into that kind of the psychology of the environment and how our environment kind of plays such a big role into how we act, into what we actually end up doing every day. So,
Yeah.
like you said, even like I have this is actually my bedroom, just to pull back the curtain here, and I used to have a desk on this side, and my bed is over here, and when I was sitting on my desk, I had my bed in my peripheral vision. So it's something like that, which like, and now I have my desk in this corner of the room. It's turned away from my bed. I have a window over here which I can, look out of and see greenery, which makes me so happy, rather
Yeah.
than just stare at this color on the wall, which I might actually have to paint now just because I'm getting depressed just looking at it. But even
Yeah.
a small change as just looking and putting a desk in a corner of a room that gives you like greenery to look at and turns you away from your bed, it's had such a marked change on my
Yeah.
productivity and how effective I am.
Yeah.
And that being said, I just want to, I think you ran through a little bit of it, but if you could just go through again, just really quickly, some of the mistakes that we make while working from home and how you have made them and how you learn from them and now have changed.
Well, I think in terms of the mistakes, one is, like I said, it's about drawing boundaries. The moment you must begin by drawing those boundaries, by having a schedule for yourself, by making sure that you're addressing the distractions that may come up before time. So, for instance, if you have a noisy home environment, then it's very important that maybe you just invest in some noise reduction earphones, which cut that noise out, because it's very, very difficult to focus on work if you can hear the pressure cooker at the back, you can hear a child screaming, you can hear someone talking, someone else is talking on the phone, some TV is going on at the back. It's really difficult to focus. So you're spending the time, but you're spending unfocused time, and therefore your productivity goes down. So I think when it comes to distractions, we also need to focus a little and see one by one that what are these distractions which are there in our environment. And we can't remove the distractions, but how can we find ways to deal with them better? So, like I said, those are some of the issues that I personally have faced working from home. And also, what happens is that very often we find ourselves in a situation where people will come running. Where's the tape? Or can you just go down, bring some milk? Now, this is what happens when you don't define a scared at boundaries. Now, if these people already know that from 6 to 7 you can run errands, they will not come to you in the middle of the day to do that. Another important and I find a pretty useful thing to do is that suppose you have a door, even a curtain, explain to your family that I'm going to put maybe just a post-it on top. And that post-it is either going to say, do not disturb, or it will not, it'll be a blank post-it, or it'll be something that says that you can come in if it's important. So what that does is that even for children, you can actually, it's an effective and fun thing to do. You can make a little game out of it, and you can put a red light or a red circle, an orange circle, and a green circle. So they know that if they want to come in, if it's green, they can just come and say hi and go back. If it's red, they're not supposed to disturb you at all. So these are little small practical things that you can incorporate in your day-to-day system of working from home, which is going to help you reduce the distractions that you would otherwise have.
Yeah, and I really like that children thing because they're also probably bored out of their minds. Give them
Yeah,
something to include them in and pass the time as well. Nice little
yeah,
project.
yeah.
Um, so Vimal had a great question related to this topic a little bit, and he
Mhm.
said, since we are working at from home now, suddenly we come across a lot of personal stuff which might affect our production time, and how do we balance it? And then also, I think it kind of comes into this question as well, is
Mhm.
to how do you separate your work and your leisure or your personal time, especially now because of this pandemic, the line has become so blurred between the two.
Yeah. Okay, so if someone could just quickly ask Vimal, if you can hear us, maybe you could type or just let us know. Can you describe what the nature of these problems are for you? Because typically it could be, things like running chores, which is something that we were talking about. But if you could give us a specific example, I could perhaps address it better for you.
I think he kind of said that he had like some distractions, whether it's his auntie or if it's his, mom or dad. Sometimes he has distractions coming in where, when he's working or when he's on a call or something. So how do you deal with that?
Okay, so there's one thing which is I find, it may not be completely honest, but it's a pretty effective way. And it's a little deterrent that works well without hurting anybody, which is that especially when, relatives who are slightly more senior, who are not that savvy with how work from home and technology and so on happens, it's a good thing to tell them that every time you come in, they can see you, and every time they can see you, it's marked as personal time for me. And every time it's marked as personal time, this is reduced from my overall work time. So that way they get the impression that, okay, if they're disturbing you, that has a real repercussion. As opposed to, it's sometimes very hard for them to process that if you're just sitting in front of a screen and all day you're just sitting in front of a screen, what it could be so important that you're doing in front of that screen. So they do not really sometimes join the dots between how your workflow could break, how it's important for you to finish some things because you could have deadlines, you can't just get up anytime you want. So a good way of putting it is this: but first, you could try to tell them that these are my working hours and I have to have X amount of output in these working hours. And every time you come in, it disrupts my thought process, my workflow, and my output reduces. So either I have to end up working longer hours or I end up missing a deadline. Now, if they don't get that, then revert to the first solution, which is telling them that you're being seen, that they are being seen, and that every time they come, people know that they've come and it's counted as personal time and not as work time. I've seen this work really, really well for a lot of people who've been in a similar situation.
That works. Sure, we'll just have it right out.
Cool. And so now, do you want to kind of explain a little bit some more detailed kind of tactics that we can use, Bindia, now to kind of separate our work and leisure time during this pandemic and work from home?
Yeah, it's a very important question. It's a very important thing as well because, earlier we had a concept of weekends. We had holidays we'd look forward to, we'd make plans for them. Now, none of that exists. Every day is as good or bad, or not a weekend or a work day because days are just rolling by. Sometimes we don't even know what day it really is. So, because the boundaries have blurred so much, and because of the fact that often not defining a workspace, is someone saying something? Sorry.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. So, because we're not defining workspace, private space, so we're also letting work flow because the laptop is there. What very often, tends to happen is that the laptop is there throughout whatever time of the night somebody else is working late. You get an alert, you go back to it. So you just don't end up creating that boundary at all. So to begin with, point one is that decide what time you turn off. There has to be a time to turn off, because even when you were working at office, there was a time when you got up and left. There may have been some odd days when you worked late because there was an urgent deadline, but more or less you would get up and leave at 6, 7, 8, whatever time it may be. Similarly, share that timing with your teammates, share it with whoever you're reporting to your manager. Tell them that I'm working these many hours from this time to this time, but at this time I will be logging out. There's an emergency contact number, but it's only for emergencies if you need me. And otherwise, I'm switching off and my device is off and out I go. Now, another good thing to do at that point is to try not to open the same device, if possible, which you use for your work, for your leisure activities, such as if you're watching something, let's say on Netflix or something else that you might want to view. And if you don't have two devices, then make sure that you have no alerts from work coming onto that device. So that's about creating the first defined boundary for yourself. The second thing to do is that I find we've just stopped planning. We've just sort of gone into this zone where everybody is just floating and struggling from one day to another, doing this balancing act. So we're just not planning anything fun or relaxing for ourselves. So try to at least once a week, if not more, a Saturday, a Sunday, any other day that works well for you, try to very mindfully have a little activity, whatever it may be. It may be that you want to sit and do a nice catch up breakfast with your friends, where you all cook something and you share with one another what you've cooked or what you're eating or what you've ordered in, and just have a nice chat. Do that as a leisure activity. So instead of going to a restaurant, which you can't do at the moment, try to still have that engagement happening, something that relaxes you. The other thing is that try to have some me time. Now, 2 to 3 hours, if you can even allot at a go to yourself in a week, let's say on a Saturday or a Sunday, if you tell everyone, please don't disturb me from this time to this time, because this time is just for me. Have that time to just reboot and do anything or nothing, whatever you please. Apart from sleeping, because you're probably sleeping at night anyway, so you won't want to spend that time sleeping, but maybe you want to spend that time watching or reading or just connecting with somebody. So have that marked out and also have that literally scheduled. Some people say, how can I schedule leisure time? But in these days, you have to schedule everything. Otherwise, the boundaries will just stay really, really blurred. So that I find is an important thing. And if you could be a little more organized with your life and put systems in place, you will find that your leisure time increases. So, for instance, let's say that you need to cook, and every day you're sitting and chopping, 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 and spending 45 minutes every day just chopping and trying to, make a masala or something, for example. Then you don't do that every day. You get a few bottles, you do the chopping once a week or once in 4 days, put it in the bottles, put it in, so that you're creating more time, which can be leisure time to be enjoyed for the rest of the days.
Like
So try
batching,
just
right?
sorry.
So like just like the concept of batching, getting doing all this stuff in
Yes.
one go and eliminating it
Because
for the rest.
yeah, we don't realize how much time we actually spend on these tasks, which we think are small tasks, but when you add up the amount of time spent on them on a daily basis, it really is a lot. So even if you spend an hour and a half cooking every day, and instead you could spend half an hour, that's 1 hour of doing something relaxing for yourself. And that's a lot of time. And that brings me back to the fact that also there should be one space which is absolutely untouched by your work, no matter what, because that one space should be your go-to relaxing space, which you do not associate with your work, where no matter what, you do not carry your laptop for any reason, your work laptop at least. And if possible, when you're taking a few of those leisure breaks, try to even keep your phone away for that much time if possible, and just make it all about truly disconnecting and relaxing. So I think there are a couple of things that we need to introduce into our lifestyle right now. And there are a lot of those things which will also serve us well post pandemic. It doesn't have to be only restricted to the pandemic because, sooner rather than later, hopefully, this will all be behind us. So if we can cultivate habits we can carry in the long term, it's a good thing to do. The first thing I find is that all of us tend to take our health very much for granted. And if there's something that's come out of this pandemic, it is that people are actually realizing how important your health is. So you need to focus on your health by making sure that no matter how sedentary your job is, no matter how small your living space is, that you create time to exercise. You do not have to do a 1 hour sweaty workout if that's not your thing. You can even spread those exercises through the day. You could do like 5-minute bursts 10 times a day, 3 times a day, twice a day, between work, however you may like. But you must have some form of exercise. And if you go onto YouTube now, there are so many videos which show you these small, short exercise sets, which can be done in a very limited space, as limited as just the space a yoga mat occupies, for example. So focus on your physical health and also focus on your mental health because that's very important at such a time. If you look around, or even if you ask yourself very honestly and examine how you're feeling in your head and heart, there is a rise overall in people feeling anxiety more than they felt before, in people feeling a certain amount of depression from time to time more than they felt before. And the stress levels for a lot of people have gone up because of the unpredictability, the uncertainty of the times that we're living in. So, when it comes to your mental health, a very good practice to do, if nothing else, just start by introducing some deep breathing into your life. Now, a lot of people, they say, oh, what is a deep breath going to do for me? Or what is like 10 minutes of deep breathing going to do for me? But the truth is, it resets your system. When you deep breathe, every single way in which we breathe does something different for our physiology. And deep breathing is very good in helping us relax and helping us reformat our internal mental hard drive. So, deep breathe, try to do 4, 6 deep breaths, which means every deep breath, when you're breathing in, breathe into a count of 4, hold it for as long as you can hold it, and gently release to a count of 6. And the key over here is to do it slowly and gently. Don't just breathe in throughout, and always do it through your nose. And while you're doing it, make sure that the right way to breathe is that when you're breathing in, your stomach is getting inflated. When you're breathing out, your stomach is getting deflated. So if you could, even if you find it hard to meditate, because there are lots of ways to meditate, but that would require a separate 1 hour for us to explore. But for now, what I could tell you is really good for you to create balance, reduce stress is deep breathing for 10 to 15 minutes every day. So do also put that into your routine for your mental health. The other thing is that it's very important right now that we all consciously try to become more resilient, more creative, and more adaptable. Because those are the three things that are going to see us through not only this time of COVID 19, but those are things which we can use for our life going ahead in any situation. So when I say creative, I don't mean you need to stitch or paint or do something like that, but I mean creative in problem solving. Even if the problem is that I'm getting bored and what do I do to entertain myself alone at home, come up with creative solutions for yourself and for the people around you. And resilience is very important because it's our ability to bounce back. That leads us to how we start reframing things in our life. Do we always see things from a negative perspective? Or do we say that no, let me see the good opportunity in this and how can something good come out of this and use that positive to feel motivated rather than just use all the negative stuff happening around to pull me down. So that's the other thing. Then it's important that we understand through this crisis the absolute importance of being self reliant. So there are two parts of this crisis. One is that we've learned that we're all interdependent, we're all interconnected, we need to help each other as communities, and that's a great learning as well. But the other part is the part of self reliance when it comes to doing your own stuff. So, especially in India, more than anywhere, we've all, by and large, been very used to domestic help. And elsewhere in the world, we've been very used to also everything getting delivered to us. And what the pandemic showed us was that this is not going to always work. So maybe if we get used to and start putting systems where we're not always so dependent on help, on staff, on getting everything to our doorstep, if we rejig our life a little bit and become more self reliant, it may serve us well even going forward in the future. And then the next thing we've learned, again, to be taken forward, I think everybody one has spoken to, the one common thread that has come out is people saying things like, I never heard birds outside my window. Suddenly I've got birds sitting outside my window. Or the longing to be in nature suddenly, which never was so huge and intense before. So
Yeah, I
as
mean,
we realize it,
I joked earlier in one of the other calls. I've lived next to a hiking place for the
uh,
last 5 years, and I never actually went and did a hike until the pandemic happened.
yeah,
So, and
yeah.
until this
So
pandemic, I never had a appreciation for that.
yeah, so maybe embrace it, bring it more into the fold of your daily life, and also respect nature and be gentler. And that brings me to another important point, which is our consumption. We've just been so wanton with our consumption of things, impulsive shopping, having so much stuff in our house that we don't need, for instance, spending on things that we just don't do anything with. So, if the crisis of COVID has taught us something, it is that we can actually function healthily and happily with far lesser than what we crowd our lives with. So, maybe take a step back and see what your consumption patterns are. And if some of them are superfluous, reduce them from your life, take them out. You don't need to do that. And that's also directly linked to one more thing, which is that the times are uncertain. And going forward, jobs are going to, in any case, pandemic or not, jobs are going to keep shrinking. As AI comes more mainstream and all of that, humans are not going to have as many jobs as we had before. So that's where adaptability comes, creativity comes, and that's where also the good sense to manage your finances comes. So you should know that you may have a job today, but these are uncertain times. So be prepared and save for that eventuality so that if that does happen to you, then you're not caught by surprise and you don't plunge into the depths of depression and doom because you don't have any backup in terms of savings. So try to cultivate the habit of saving some money, which, like I said, will also serve you well now as well as later. So I think these are some things we can, use now and take forward.
Yeah, I mean, that was you touched on so many things. I felt like I got like a lesson in adulthood right there. But I one thing that I kind of wanted to just again just drill in was we had a few questions. We had one from Purutho Saman and also from Akshay Daniel, and they really they were their questions were kind of based on how to mitigate stress. And I think
Mhm.
something that you said before in terms of the deep breathing, I think that can be a very big tool in order to help manage your stress, also get rid of stress in the actual moment because like you said, it's like a reset to your whole entire body and your
Yeah.
mind as well. And one of the other questions that we kind of had was because of this stress,
Mhm.
sometimes like people are not able to get a good night's sleep. So
Mhm.
what are some of the things that we can do in order to get that good night's sleep? Just because it's very important in order to perform daily, especially during this time.
Yeah. So, stress happens because of so many reasons. I mean, to begin with, if you just take something as basic as the news we expose ourselves to, there's so much negative talk happening everywhere on every news channel. It's just doom and gloom, and everything's bad. And there's a pandemic. There are people who are like dictators. It's like the world is almost falling apart because news works on a negativity bias. They need to feed us negative stories because that's what keeps us hooked onto our screens. So, I would say, and it's really helpful, is that try to not expose yourself to too much news led toxicity. And one way of doing that is by reading the news rather than watching the news. Because visual images, A, they tend to stick in our mind a lot more, as well as when you are watching something, if they're going deep into this story, everyone's screaming and shouting about it, and there's high temperatures happening, we tend to get sucked into it for way longer, and we also lose perspective of what the seed of that may be. And sometimes we step back and we're feeling so stressed after, for instance, watching a debate on, one of the regular channels where everyone's having this heated debate. Overall, you feel more stressed by the end of it. So try not exposing yourself to that. It's not to say don't have access to the news, but read it if possible instead of watching it, especially when it's too toxic for you. So recognize that toxicity, reduce the stress that way. The second thing that happens is that there is a lot of stress that comes from procrastinating, especially about work. So, and it gets even worse when we're working out of home because everyone's there in a virtual environment as opposed to in a physical office. You can see others are also milling around working. So you also get charged up to do that. At home, you'll probably think, okay, I'll do it after lunch, I'll do it in the evening, I'll do it after a snack, and you keep procrastinating over it. So thin slice your day. Make sure that you do certain tasks by a certain time. Make a proper, very, very thin sliced timetable for yourself. Go with the rule of 1-3-5, which is every day, start the day by addressing one big problem, then go to three medium ones or tasks as it may be, and then go to five small ones. So if you break your day like that and you also distribute these tasks in times where, so the first most important one should ideally happen first thing in the morning when you're freshest and most agile. Keep the other five ones spread through the day at times when your energy is a bit low, so they can happen at that time. So plan and keep getting things off your to-do list so that the stress doesn't build up, because a lot of time procrastination leads to very high stress levels. Include the exercise because exercise induces natural releases, natural good neurotransmitters, the feel good neurotransmitters in our body, and that elevates our mood and doesn't allow us to slump as much into the whole stress loop. So if you're having a good workout that makes you sweat, if you're doing your deep breathing and eating right, so choose what you're eating, choose what you're eating, when you're eating, have a good, healthy, balanced diet, and don't consume more than you're burning. Because all of us have now, anyway, got a more sedentary lifestyle by and large. So make sure you're careful about your intake as opposed to your burn. So if you keep these few things in mind, the stress should go down. And one last thing I'd like to say on the stress point is that if you have a manager, if you have colleagues, try to start your day by having even a short meeting with them where they can define to you, or if you're the manager, have a meeting with people who are working in your team to define to them on a day-to-day basis that what is expected of them on that day. Even if it's just a quick 10-minute meeting, it gives everyone clarity. And when there's less ambiguity, there is less stress. So see if you can bring these small things into the fold.
Great. Again, great. You hit a lot of areas there. And just one thing that I kind of wanted to comment on right now. I think the thing that resonated completely with me was your point about news. And today everything is so online, and also everything's very polarized, that news can be very, very toxic. And when you try and do your kind of citizen duty and try and stay informed about whether it's politics or even if it's like business and finance and technology or something, it's so toxic that it gets really hard, and it kind of takes a damper on your mental health, actually, or at least it had for me. So one of the things I've actually discovered through this pandemic is this site called Morning Brew, and it's a really good. It's like a free daily newsletter that goes and gives you like the main topics of the day. That I just linked in the group chat if anybody wants to, sign up for it. It's a free daily newsletter. It takes 5 minutes. And the best thing is that they present the information in a non-political way. It's not toxic. And even more enough, it's actually funny. So I actually laugh sometimes at the morning when I'm reading this every day. And like you said, like these routines and habits, I think, the most important thing that you can do for yourself, or at least it has been for me, is put some sort of routine into your life. Because with the routine, your mind gets engaged, and as a result of doing the same thing every day, you get more comfortable, and you're also able to be more effective. So even like the simple, thing of just, having a cup of coffee and, reading my morning brew newsletter every day in the morning, it just primes me for the day. It gives me some stuff that I can talk about or think about later.
Yeah.
So yeah, feel free to check that out. I put the link in the comments. And so I think we've kind of covered a lot of, these boundaries, and I think just this is like the mothership right now. Spending so much time at home, we're always on our devices, as we said. Um, and how can we really draw healthier boundaries with technology and practice, digital hygiene? Because I think technology and, entertainment through Netflix and Amazon and Hulu or whatever, that's really, something that, kind of like gets the balancing act out of whack. So, um, just to kind of round out this program, can you
Yeah.
give us some advice on that front?
So I think the very first thing that everyone should be very aware and mindful of is the fact that earlier, if we had two pillars of health, which were mental and physical, now we have three pillars of health, which is mental, physical, and digital, because technology has become such a huge, huge part of our life and is starting to have such a big impact on our health, both physical and mental. So the rules have changed a little bit for where the boundaries lie with technology because of the pandemic, because there's so many things we can't do without technology right now. But there are a few ground rules which I would suggest you try to embrace and get into the fold of your life, which would be really, really helpful. So let's start with first and foremost defining a few hours which are completely gadget free. And even if that gadget, let's say, not gadget, but let's say screen free to begin with. So in that time, you do something else. Play a board game if you have someone at home, read a book, sit, think, walk, run, do anything else, but don't go and glue yourself to the screen in that time. So that could be, 1 hour at the end of the day before you go to sleep, or it could be the first hour in the morning, because you've woken up fresh. Don't expose yourself straight away to a screen. Get your balance, get set for the day, and then look at the screen. So if you define an hour a day which is tech free, that's really, really good. The other thing is that try to find offline activities which work for you. Don't make everything an online activity. It's not necessary that every game, everything that you do has to be happening on a device. Try to make that segregation, and if possible, try to segregate devices. So right now, our phone is the begin and end all of almost everything. We set the alarm, we listen to music, we watch stuff on it, we work or through our phone. Everything happens there. So constantly alerts are coming, and everything has become like one melted pot of lots and lots of stimulus. And our dopamine levels are just going up and down, spiking and short circuiting all the time. So if you can get a separate alarm clock, if you can get a separate device, so if you're unwinding and listening to music, you can hear it on that instead of your phone also pinging away in the middle. It's a good thing to segregate those devices. Next thing you can do is that when you're sharing time with your family, if you have family or friends in your physical space, then during meal times, make it a rule for the entire family to leave their gadgets out. So you shouldn't be sitting at the dining table with everyone reading their messages and not engaging with one another. It's a very, very wonderful time to actually sit and bond with your friends and family or people you're sharing time with. So make those times completely gadget and device free. And then, lastly, what you can do is that 30 minutes before you sleep, at least 30 minutes, ideally it should be an hour, but at least 30 minutes before you sleep, put all devices off, because the light that emanates from our screens also impacts our sleep patterns. in a very, very negative way. So best to get that out of the way. You may feel, oh, but I'm tossing and turning, so I need to grab my phone again. Toss and turn for a while. Doesn't matter. It's better than having exposure right to the last minute to your screen. And this brings me to the issue somebody had posed of not being able to sleep well. A lot of people's sleep patterns have completely either gotten reversed or gotten really, really damaged or disrupted during this pandemic. So one thing to do is try to define the same time you go to bed, and so a routine. So sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time. If you're having trouble falling to sleep, then try to have, before you go to bed, try to see if you can get a chamomile tea, which is decaf. It really works well in just soothing your nerves. If you can get it, let it steeple for 5 minutes, drink a cup of chamomile tea half an hour before you're ready for bed, have very low stimulus activity instead of watching something which is engaging and pulls you in. Read a book, but not a book which is a thriller so that you want to just keep turning the pages. Read something which is a little more low key, maybe some non-fiction, and then go to bed. Try again to relax your body completely and just try to take a few gentle deep breaths at that time, which will help you release the stress. If you like, you can even imagine that every time you're breathing in peace and calm, and every time you're breathing out all the stresses of the day. So try to imagine that visually for yourself. It'll help calm you down and bring sleep more easily.
Right. Just don't do anything that is on the screen right now. Just don't do what they're doing. No devices in bed.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean we kind of come to the end of the program here. So I'd really like to thank Bindiya for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you for having
Bindiya,
me.
do you have time for like just maybe any questions that anybody has?
Yeah, sure. If someone has some questions, please ask.
Yeah, so if anybody has anything they want to ask, please, go ahead. This is your chance, one opportunity or not.
Okay, well, if nobody has a question, I would like to leave everyone with one last thought before we sign off, which is that I don't know how many people know that Shakespeare wrote some of his best work when he was in lockdown during the bubonic plague. So the lesson for us to learn from here is that yes, we don't all have to be Shakespeare, but great things can come out of crisis. So don't just focus on the negative, focus on the positives, and remember that this too will pass. It's not going to be here forever. And as a civilization, we're very resilient. We're going to get through this. So just hang in there, define your boundaries, look at life a little more differently with a little more ease, and we'll all get past this together.
Right. That was a beautiful way to end it. I just now like to invite Clara. Can you just thank and do some closing thoughts?
Amazing session as usual, Bindia. I wasn't expecting anything less but more.
Oh,
And I think we have to call you back again for especially one of my favorite topics, that is the digital wellness. I think you have a lot to talk about that. And Rohan is smiling there, he knows why. And all of us talk about this, especially that having dinner or any meal without the gadgets. And
yeah,
somehow that's a temptation that it's very difficult to resist. And
yeah,
sometimes our conversations also happen saying, you saw that, you saw this, and then you kind of share it. And so I think we have to offline ourselves completely. And some of your things I want to share is that when you were talking about how you started working from home, actually core competence started from, a home. And, although we have an office and things like that, there are many times that, I use that commute time to
yeah,
actually do other things. And
right.
when this pandemic happened, like, of course, for majority of Indian community, they are not used to it. But
Yeah,
here in US, like the culture is different. The fact that you can pack off your children and then you have the whole house to yourself, which is quiet, and then you kind of work with more, discipline, as you said.
yeah,
So that's a new concept for India. But as you mentioned, that there's so much of advantage that you can get out of this particular crisis, that it should not be seen as, it's just thrown another way of, adapting.
Yeah.
And it's just about the mindset. And there are so many other things that you said. In fact, my personal thing is that when you spoke about being one with nature, I used to do gardening while I was a kid. There was a funny thing. I used to, when I was little, I used to love gardening, and there is this thing that I do, the talking with the plants. Like I talk with one plant and then another plant. I never got to do that when I grew up, and and it's so nice to get back to that. Of course, I don't talk to the plants, but actually I do. But it's a funny thing to relive some of the things that you have that was just kind of passed away. And this pandemic may be very bad for a lot of our community, because they have lost precious lives and family members. But it also, as you said, like throws a different opportunity. And there's always an advantage in everything that comes to you in life. And when you look back, you're thankful. So thank you for such an amazing session. And and as you can see, this is something where I've been deprived of my normal workplace. Now I am in this attic bedroom, which was thrown away upstairs. It doesn't have an air conditioning. So when I on the air conditioning and I attend the meeting, people say someone is flying a jet plane. I don't have any other rooms. I have this room because everybody else is online and they need their specific.
Yeah.
So I really miss that time when everybody's out of home and I'm working. But thank you so much for your
thanks, Clara.
So such a precious session, words of wisdom, and I think we have to call you back. So
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.